Forget Melbourne's $1 million shoebox apartments. Forget Sydney's 2-hour commutes just to afford a garage. While mainland Australia loses its mind over property prices that would make your grandparents weep, there's an island at the bottom of the map where you can still buy an entire house for less than a second-hand Toyota Camry. Tasmania, the island everyone forgets about until they remember it exists. And in 15 towns scattered across this wilderness, houses are selling for under $30,000. Not deposits, not down payments, the entire property. You could pay cash with your savings account and still have enough left over for a moving truck. But here's what the real estate agents won't tell you when they're showing you these bargain listings. These aren't quaint coastal cottages with ocean views and cafe culture. These are towns the rest of Australia forgot existed. Towns where the last cinema closed in 1973, where the pub is also the post office, and where your nearest neighbour might be a Bennett's Wallaby with better property prospects than you. Today, we're travelling to the cheapest towns in Tasmania. The places where houses cost less than used cars, where entire streets sit empty, and where you'll discover whether dirt cheap property is the deal of a lifetime or a one-way ticket to isolation that even your GPS will regret. Number 1. Zeehan, on Tasmania's remote west coast. This former silver mining boomtown once had 10,000 people and 26 hotels lining its main street. The miners spent their wages in pubs that operated around the clock. Today, 700 residents remain, most of them retirees or workers at distant mines, and you can buy a 3-bedroom weatherboard house for $22,000. The Zeehan township sits in the shadow of the West Coast Range Mountains, surrounded by dense, temperate rainforest, getting over 2,000 millimetres of rain annually. The Grand Gaiety Theatre from 1898 still stands as a museum, its ornate facade a reminder of wealth that evaporated. Walk the quiet residential streets and you'll see rusted corrugated iron roofs, overgrown gardens reclaiming front yards, and for sale signs weathering multiple winters without offers. The nearest supermarket is in Queenstown, 33 kilometres on winding mountain roads that become treacherous in winter fog. Medical care beyond first aid requires 2 hours to Burnie on the north coast. The reason houses cost less than used cars is simple: no jobs. The Renaissance Bell, tin mine 40 kilometres away, employs some locals, but positions are limited and require specialised skills. The town survives on passing tourists heading to Zeehan and retirees who bought cheap and don't plan to leave. Number 2. Queenstown, where $18,000 buys a house with views looking like Mars colonised by Australians who gave up. The Mount Lyell copper mine stripped every tree from the surrounding hills for over a century, leaving orange and red lunar landscapes of oxidised rock that photographers love, and environmentalists cite as cautionary tales. Weatherboard houses in fading pastels stack on steep hillsides above a main street with a functioning IGA supermarket and pubs where locals discuss mining news. Walking through Queenstown feels like stepping onto a movie set for a post-apocalyptic film, except the apocalypse already happened in slow motion over 100 years. The barren terraced hills draw tourists but test residents through 190 rainy days yearly. For $18,000, you get a 2-bedroom fibro house viewing either Moonscape Hills or someone else's cheap house. The backyard might be a steep slope, and erosion constantly threatens foundations. Population is 1,900, down from 5,000 during the mining boom. The mine still operates, offering some employment, but it's a shadow of its former self. You're betting on remote work or genuine love of Australia's most bizarre township. Number 3. Rosebery, where 25,000 buys a house in a town smelling vaguely metallic because the zinc and lead mine literally defines everything about this place. The MMG Rosebery mine has been pulling minerals from beneath the Tarkine wilderness since 1936. The township of just over 600 people sits in a valley surrounded by World Heritage wilderness, creating jarring contrast between industrial mining operation and untouched rainforest. Drive into Rosebery and you'll immediately notice mine infrastructure dominating the landscape. Processing facilities, tailings dams, and industrial equipment form the backdrop to suburban streets where children ride bikes and locals tend modest gardens. You're buying into a town with an expiration date. The mine has reserves, but minerals don't last forever. And when extraction becomes unprofitable, company towns die fast. The Tarkine rainforest surrounding Rosebery gets over 3,000 millimeters of rain annually, making it one of the wettest inhabited places in Australia. Moss grows on everything. Moisture seeps into walls. The nearest cinema is in Burnie, 90 kilometers away on winding mountain roads. Number 4. Savage River, where the houses are so cheap they sometimes throw in the furniture because hauling it out costs more than the entire property is worth. Savage River exists because of iron ore. The mine here feeds the pellet plant at Port Lottah on the north coast, connected by a dedicated railway line that hauls ore through wilderness. The township has fewer than 300 people, most of them employed directly or indirectly by the mining operation. Houses here list for as low as $15,000, which sounds incredible until you drive the 55 kilometers of rough road from the Bass Highway and realize why nobody's rushing to buy. The town consists of basic fibro houses built in the 1960s and 70s. Dense rainforest presses in from all sides. The Savage River runs cold and clear nearby, and the isolation is so complete you can hear your own thoughts echo. The town has a small store, a community hall, and not much else. Medical emergencies mean helicopter evacuation or a long drive to the coast. If you genuinely want to disappear from modern Australia, this is where you do it. The cheap housing is the consolation prize for choosing a life where pizza delivery is impossible. Number 5. Branxholm in Tasmania's northeast, where $30,000 buys you a house in a town that peaked economically sometime during the Menzies government. Branxholm sits in the Ringarooma Valley, surrounded by farmland and forestry plantations that once supported a thriving timber industry. The township has around 300 people, down from over 1,000 during the timber boom years. The main street has a general store, a pub, and several empty shops with faded signage advertising businesses that closed decades ago. Drive through Branxholm and you'll notice the pattern. One house immaculately maintained, the next one sagging with neglect, then another with a for sale sign that's been there so long the real estate company changed names twice. The surrounding countryside is beautiful in that understated Tasmanian way. Rolling green hills, stands of eucalyptus, and working farms that have been in the same families for generations. For $30,000, you're getting a house that needs work. Always. These aren't investment properties waiting for gentrification. These are elderly people's homes whose children have moved to mainland Australia and would rather sell cheap than deal with maintaining an empty house 2,000 kilometres from where they actually live. Number 6. Derby, where $28,000 buys you a house in a former tin mining town that's attempting reinvention as a mountain biking destination and mostly succeeding at remaining forgotten. Derby sits in the Ringarooma Valley's upper reaches, a town that once had 3,000 people serving the Briseis tin mine. Today, the population hovers around 200, and the town survives on forestry workers, mountain bikers using the world-class trail network built in recent years, and retirees who bought cheap houses. The Derby township has kept more services than most dying Tasmanian towns. There's a pub that actually serves decent food, a general store, a primary school, and the mountain bike trails wind through surrounding forests, drawing visitors year-round. The Dorset Council invested millions into the trail network, hoping to create an outdoor recreation economy. The effort has brought some life back to Derby, but economically, it's still a town in slow decline. For $28,000, you're buying a weatherboard cottage on a large block within walking distance of trails that international mountain biking magazines actually write about. The mountain biking community has created a small pocket of vibrancy, but it's seasonal and fragile. Winter in Derby is cold, wet, and dark. Number 7. Avoca on Tasmania's east coast, where $24,000 gets you a house in a town that the Midland Highway forgot when they built the bypass. Avoca once thrived as a stop on the main route between Hobart and Launceston, with travellers stopping for fuel and food. Then they built the highway bypass, and suddenly nobody needed to drive through Avoca anymore. The township of around 300 people sits just a few kilometres off the main road, but in psychological terms, it might as well be on another planet. The main street of Avoca still has historic buildings from the town's 19th century coaching days. The general store operates, there's a small museum, and the community maintains the town's heritage character with genuine pride. The surrounding countryside is classic Tasmanian Midlands, rolling pastoral land dotted with sheep. For $24,000, you're buying a cottage that probably started as a worker's dwelling in the 1800s and has been added to haphazardly ever since. The roofs are often a patchwork of different materials from various repair attempts. The floors slope in interesting directions, and the heating consists of a wood stove that hasn't been serviced since Bob Hawke was Prime Minister. Avoca's proximity to the highway is both blessing and curse. You're only 45 minutes from Launceston, but the bypass means the town sees no passing trade. Number 8. Lottah, a name that sounds like it belongs in a fantasy novel, but is actually a tiny settlement where houses sell for $19,000. And civilization is what you make of it. Lottah exists as a locality rather than a proper town, scattered along the Lottah Road in Tasmania's northeast. The population is under 100, most of them farmers or forestry workers who value isolation over infrastructure. Properties here aren't suburban houses, they're weatherboard cottages on large rural blocks, often without town water or sewerage. The landscape around Lottah is working rural Tasmania, grazing paddocks, forestry plantations, and the dense bush that reclaims any land left unmanaged. The Ringarooma River flows nearby, and the countryside has that raw beauty that either appeals to you or leaves you wondering why anyone would choose this. For $19,000, you're buying a basic dwelling that probably hasn't seen an electrician since decimal currency was introduced. You'll be heating with wood, maintaining your own water supply, and accepting that your internet connection will be satellite with all the latency and dropouts that implies. Lottah is where you move when you want to be left alone. When you've decided that modern society's trade-offs aren't worth it. Number 9. Rushy Lagoon, near the northwest coast, where $26,000 buys you a house in a settlement so small that calling it a town feels generous. Rushy Lagoon sits inland from Smithton, surrounded by dairy farms and potato fields that drive Tasmania's northwest agricultural economy. The settlement consists of scattered houses along rural roads, with no real town centre or commercial district. The population barely registers in census data. Properties in Rushy Lagoon are typically older farmhouses or workers' cottages from when the surrounding agricultural land was subdivided into smaller holdings. For $26,000, you're getting a weatherboard house on anywhere from 1 to 5 acres, enough land to keep a few animals or grow vegetables, but not enough to make a living from farming. The houses are basic, often without modern insulation or heating. The appeal of Rushy Lagoon is purely economic. You can buy an entire property for less than a year's rent in Hobart. Smithton is 20 minutes away, providing supermarkets, medical care, and basic services. But winter is cold and wet, your house will be hard to heat, and maintenance never ends. Number 10. Tunnel, another northeast settlement where $23,000 buys you a house in a place named after the railway tunnel that made the town relevant in 1876 and hasn't been relevant since. Tunnel sits on the old Launceston to Scottsdale railway line, which closed in 1929, taking most of the town's economic reason to exist with it. Today, the locality has around 100 people, scattered across rural holdings and a handful of houses clustered near where the original town centre used to be. For $23,000, you're buying a cottage that someone's grandparents probably lived in, possibly raised a family in, and certainly never spent money modernising. These houses have fireplaces, but no central heating, single-pane windows that leak cold air, and electrical systems that spark concern from anyone with building knowledge. Tunnel's location puts it within commuting distance of Scottsdale, making it theoretically viable for people with jobs in town who want cheaper housing. But the reality is more complex. The roads are rural, meaning winter fog and occasional flooding make the commute treacherous. What seems like a bargain becomes a logistical challenge. Number 11. Mole Creek in the Northern Midlands, where $32,000 almost feels expensive compared to the other towns on this list, but you're getting an actual town with actual services. Mole Creek has over 300 people, a proper main street with a pub, a general store, a primary school, and the nearby Mole Creek Karst National Park that draws tourists to see the spectacular limestone caves. The township serves the surrounding agricultural district, giving it an economic foundation beyond just cheap housing. For $32,000, you're buying into a town that functions rather than merely exists. The community is active with local organisations, annual events like the Mole Creek Agricultural Show, and enough population to support basic commerce. The surrounding countryside is genuinely beautiful, with the Western Tiers mountain range providing a dramatic backdrop. But Mole Creek is still remote by mainland standards. Devonport is 45 minutes away. Launceston is an hour. Medical care means the GP clinic when it's open, or a trip to the coast for anything serious. Number 12. Liawenee, Australia's coldest permanently inhabited place, where $21,000 buys you a house and the certainty of snow-related regrets. Liawenee sits in Tasmania's Central Highlands at over 1,000 metres elevation, surrounded by hydro lakes and wilderness. The township exists primarily to house workers for the nearby hydro schemes, with a permanent population under 20. For $21,000, you're buying into a place where winter temperatures routinely drop to -10 Celsius, where snow can fall in any month of the year, and where your heating bills will exceed your mortgage payments. The houses are small, heavily insulated by necessity, and designed around efficient heating systems because fuel costs dominate your budget. The landscape is stark and beautiful in that alpine way, all button grass plains and scattered snow gums against dramatic mountain backdrops. Liawenee is not for everyone. The nearest anything is in Bothwell, 40 kilometres away on a road that closes in heavy snow. Medical emergencies require helicopter evacuation. Number 13. Beaconsfield on the northwest coast, where $27,000 buys you a house in a town still processing trauma from the 2006 mine collapse that trapped 2 miners underground for 14 days. Beaconsfield once thrived on gold mining, with the Beaconsfield gold mine operating from 1877 until 2012. The mine collapse brought international attention, but it also marked the beginning of the end for the town's economic foundation. Today, Beaconsfield has around 1,200 people, down from its peak, with a main street showing all the signs of slow decline. For $27,000, you're buying a weatherboard cottage in a town that has infrastructure but declining prospects. The houses are typically miners' cottages from the early 20th century, upgraded over decades but never truly modernised. Beaconsfield sits just inland from the Tamar River, 10 minutes from Beauty Point and 20 minutes from Launceston. This makes it more viable than the truly remote towns. But the mining's end has left an economic void the tourism industry can't fill. Number 14. Mangana in the Northeast Highlands, where $18,000 buys you a house in a town that makes other dying towns look vibrant by comparison. Mangana sits on the rural plains near the Ben Lomond National Park, surrounded by grazing land and forestry. The township has under 50 permanent residents, most of them farmers or retirees who bought when property was even cheaper than it is now. For $18,000, you're buying a house that probably hasn't been occupied full-time in years. The properties here are typically estates being sold by descendants who inherited them and want them gone. The houses are small, cold, and require comprehensive renovation to meet any modern standard of comfort. But the land is there, usually several acres. Mangana is the ultimate isolation play. You're 40 kilometres from St Mary's, the nearest town with services, and over an hour from Launceston. The winters are harsh, the summers are brief. Number 15, St Mary's, where we end on something almost reasonable. $35,000 buys you a house in a town that actually has a supermarket, medical centre, and enough population to support a proper pub. St Mary's sits on Tasmania's east coast, with about 600 people and genuine town infrastructure. The surrounding area supports farming, forestry, and tourism to nearby coastal attractions. For $35,000, you're getting the top end of Tasmania's cheap housing market. The houses have been maintained better, the location offers more opportunities, and the town provides services that make daily life manageable. St Mary's has a primary school, high school, medical facilities, shops, and regular community events. The East Coast beaches are close enough for weekend recreation, and Launceston is 90 minutes away when you need city resources. This is where Tasmania's cheap housing crosses from desperation, purchase, into potentially viable lifestyle choice. So there you have it. 15 Tasmanian towns where houses cost less than used cars, ranging from absolute isolation in places like Savage River and Liawenee to almost functional communities like St Mary's and Mole Creek. The pattern is clear. Tasmania's cheap housing exists in places the economy left behind, where mines closed or bypasses were built, or young people moved away seeking opportunities that small towns simply cannot provide. These aren't investment properties waiting to appreciate. These are houses selling for what they're actually worth in locations where nobody wants to live. But for the right person, someone who values space over convenience, silence over services, and ownership over luxury, these towns offer something increasingly rare in modern Australia: a chance to own your home outright, to live without mortgage stress, to trade societal expectations for personal freedom. The question isn't whether these houses are cheap, they absolutely are. The question is whether you're prepared to accept what that cheapness actually costs.